What is up, everybody, and welcome into the Locked On Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Today and all week, I'm going to be flying solo. Matt Moore is on vacation, a much deserved vacation for Mr. Moore. So I'm going to be flying solo, try to get some somebody says happy Thanksgiving. Oh, it's like Thanksgiving. Going to be trying to get some guests on for this week, as well as talking big picture stuff. We got 6-ish weeks before we get Eurobasket, which will be the next like newsworthy thing that happens in the Nuggets cycle. The next 6 weeks are the true offseason, the deep offseason. It's not a long one. It does give us a chance to kind of catch our breath, talk big picture narrative stuff that's going on with the Nuggets, and kind of craft some of that stuff. I actually like the offseason. I think it gives a good chance to dive into some things. I know me personally, I'm working with, you guys know my buddy Gibson Piper. He runs the account Half Court Hoops, working on the entire Nuggets playbook right now. And then that'll give me a chance to start breaking that down before too long, talking about, some of the different plays that were in the Nuggets playbook and how we anticipate they're going to be run. So I'm excited. I like the offseason. I know not everybody does, but I like it. Today, Summer League wrapped up, and we didn't get a chance to do shows over the last two games. Although, to be honest, my notes for those two games were very thin, not a whole lot. I think rather than recap the last two Summer League games, I think it'll be best just we'll talk about the core, 5 guys, 3 draftees, 2 two-way guys, and just talk about what is the best case scenario and worst case scenario for each of those guys, each of those players this season. And then what do I expect? What do I personally kind of expect is going to happen for those guys? So I think that would be, rather than recap the games, I think this will be a better way to go. As always, we're on YouTube. So if you want to follow along all week, I'll probably be doing some mailbag stuff. So people that are live, if you want to watch live and you want to submit some questions, follow us on YouTube and you can participate in the show that way. All right, let's get into it. First guy, Christian Braun. The more I go and rewatch some of these games, get into the tape and really break down the stats and just think about, what did Christian Braun do? I think I'm a little bit in the minority on this. I think Christian Braun showed me some stuff that I'm encouraged by. He didn't shoot the ball well. He didn't really score the ball well. It wasn't just the three-point shot. It was also some of the drives and finishes through contact and stuff like that I thought and I hoped he was going to pop a little bit more. He didn't look great there. Like, he gets a C- maybe D effort as a scorer. But I think all of the other stuff, which isn't as loud as scoring, I think he actually looks really good. So to me, I actually look at the Summer League and go, I would give him a B. You can't give him an A because of the shooting, but I think he really did like A-level stuff in terms of defensively, just hustle stuff, which is what he's going to be asked to do. So I am actually pretty encouraged with Christian Braun from here. If we talk about where does he go from here? I've talked to enough people in the Nuggets organization, even as recently as last week, who have the feeling that Christian Braun is going to be competing for real minutes with the Nuggets right out of the gate. And I don't mean like, oh, maybe he'll get an opportunity if somebody goes down. Like, I think when you go into training camp, there's an opportunity to say, okay, 5 guys are locked in. The starters are locked in. Bones Highland is locked in. Jeff Green is probably locked in. Bruce Brown is locked in. So that's 8 guys that are locked in. I think there's 2 spots where there's some room for people to impress or fall out. Zeke Naji, the most likely of all of those guys, I think to say like, okay, he belongs. I think the Nuggets want him to be that guy. He's the next one. And then you go to the other side and you go, are they going to go with a 9-man rotation? Is it Davon Reed? Is it Ish Smith? How does that shake out? I think there's all of those options are, there's a case for each of them. But I think the best option for the Nuggets would be if Christian Braun is good enough in camp that going into the season, him or Davon Reed is a real argument, that you're looking at it and going, who deserves those minutes? I don't know. Like, maybe Christian Braun brings the thing that we need more, and we feel like if we play him right out of the gate by December, January, it'll be a no contest. He just has more upside. I think that's a real hope for the Nuggets this year. It's definitely a hope for me, and I think it's within the realm of possibility. So high end, he's the backup shooting guard at the start of the season. He plays about 15 minutes per game, and that includes the playoffs. If he's good enough to earn a spot right out of the gate, again, this is high end. I'm not saying this is my prediction yet, but this is the high end for him. If that's the case, the things he does, defend, rebound, just hustle, those things should translate to the playoffs. So I think there's a chance there. Shoots roughly 40% from 3 on low volume. I don't think he's going to be a volume 3-point shooter. he didn't shoot the ball well. I think we would all look at his summer league completely differently if he did exactly what he did, only he made 5, 6, 7 more shots. I mean, summer league, it's only 4 games. He sat out the last one. So it's not like, he missed so many shots that you're like, it's just such a small sample size that the percentages look bad. But if he makes 6 more shots this entire summer league, he's at 40%. And we're looking at him going, oh my God, he averaged 15 points. I think he averaged 11 and a half. Instead, he averaged 15 points per game and he shot 40% from 3. And he, was top 10 in steals. I think we would feel really good about that. For him, though, is that he's a 40% 3-point shooter on extremely low volume. Like, he just doesn't take any bad threes ever. He's never handed grenades because he's not that player. Like, you get to the end of shot clock with your second unit, you're probably giving the ball to Thailand, maybe Jeff Green. Like, those are the guys that are going to be catching grenades. He's going to only be taking the easy shots. So maybe he's shooting 40% on low volume. That would be the high end of what you can expect. And then I think he would have an Austin Rivers-like impact defensively. I mean, without looking it up, what did Austin Rivers shoot from 3 last year? You probably couldn't say off the top of your head. You just know that he wasn't a guy you thought when he shot it, oh, that's for sure in. But he's also not a guy that you thought when he got an open look, you were like, oh my God, close my eyes, this isn't going to happen. He was a little bit streaky as a shooter, but you didn't care because he played such great defense and he was good enough that you at least had hope when he launched a 3 that it was going to go in. I think Christian Braun, high end again, can have a similar impact where you're like, when he's on the court, the defense is a little bit better. He grabs all the loose balls. He'll get 1 or 2 deflections when he's out there. You just kind of know he's going to do something. And oh, by the way, you don't cringe every time he launches from 3. And then, just a guy who impacts the game, thrives in that low usage role. If we go to low end now, like, okay, that's the optimistic, seems like the best case scenario. I don't think you could make a case that he goes above just rotation piece. Like, I don't think there's a world where you're like, he's a starter by the end of the year. I don't think there's anything like that. He's probably tops out next year. Brightest timeline is a guy that plays 2 stints, in the first half, start of the second quarter, and then he comes in the same part in the second half, like into third quarter, start of fourth quarter. Like that, to me, that seems the most realistic outcome for him as a high end. Low end, I think a couple things. One of them is outside of his control. The bench could struggle. This could be a real thing. Like if you get out there, I always say this happened to Isaiah Hartenstein a couple years ago, where the team got off to a 1-4 start, and it was like, boom, the runway for all you young players is so much shorter. You only got very limited. So if the bench struggles, and Michael Malone spends the first month of the season or longer searching for the bench, like we can't get it to work. Every time they go out there, they hemorrhage leads, just like last year. Then maybe Malone is a little bit less inclined to try rookie moves, meaning like, okay, we're going to really swing for the fences here. Maybe it's right off the bat. All of a sudden it's like, nope, Yoke needs to play more minutes. KCP needs to play more minutes. Bruce Brown, like the security blanket guys get a lot of minutes, and he just never gets that great opportunity. I think this is part of a low end scenario, worst case scenario. And then I still think he'll get a shot even then, but I think the other low end is that he struggles in those limited minutes. One of the difficult parts about being a rookie is you don't get as long of a runway as, say, somebody in the same position who's a veteran. In this case, that person's Davon Reed. If you threw out, if Malone was searching, he's like, I can't figure out this lineup, and you threw out Davon Reed, and he, C- performance, just never looks that great. It's not really killing you, but he's not looking that great. And then you throw out Christian Braun, same exact thing, same exact input. You're probably going to go back to Davon Reed because it's like, okay, well, he's a veteran, and I kind of know what I'm getting from him, and I'm going to stay. He's been around the program or whatever. So maybe he goes in and struggles and just has a tight leash. I think that's part of this, where maybe we just saw in Summer League. And Matt, in fact, if you want to say the most discouraging part about his game, in my opinion, from my perspective, would be that he didn't necessarily look super confident. Like once he started missing shots, you kind of got the sense that he was in his own head. Well, how is he going to perform now when he's got a tight leash? When he's first chance he gets, there's an injury, he's out there, he doesn't play well, Malone yanks him, he plays 3 minutes, Malone yanks him. Does he get tight? Does he get a little nervous? And now all of a sudden you're like, man, this is not fair to him. Like this is one of the things we say sometimes is, man, it wasn't fair to that young player to be put in that position. I think one of the most underrated things about Bones Hyland this last year was that he had a pretty unshakable confidence. And part of this is the things went well. The vibe was great. He was in a good situation where the Nuggets were so shorthanded. It was like, what are we going to do? Like it was a great situation for him in a way that it's not going to be for Christian Braun. But I do think there's something too. Bones is an insanely confident guy just as a person. And, that didn't waver throughout the course of the season. He gets COVID or he goes into protocols, comes back. Like you thought, oh my God, he just missed his chance. he still made the most of it when he got back. So Christian Braun, that would be part of it, is he goes out there, he doesn't play well, and you can see it affects his confidence. Shoots poorly in the G League. I don't know how much he's going to play in the G League. Since he's the first round draft pick, the Nuggets probably send him there a little bit, just they want to get him minutes. But if he goes down there and even if they say they send him down there for 3 games, you got 3 games in 4 nights or 5 nights or something, let's send him down there to get some run. If he has a similar shooting output, 1 of 7, 1 of 8, 0 of 6, even if it's in limited games and you look up and you're like, oh my God, over the weekend, he just shot 2 of 24 from 3 or 2 of 18 from 3. Like you start to worry about his shooting. You start to worry. It starts to become a conversation. I think with Summer League, we can erase all of that with, a good training camp, a good preseason, a couple good weeks in the G League. But if you start to compound that, I think it starts to become a story of, can this guy actually shoot? And then lastly, part of the low end, my one question for him, I really like his game. My one question is he a good defender that can become a great defender at the NBA level? Or is he a good defender who can become solved at the NBA level? And by the way, most good defenders in the NBA can be solved by someone. We've seen, like Austin Rivers, I thought did a great job defensively. Damian Lillard gave him 55 points in a playoff series. It's weird to say he played good defense and gave up 55, but that can happen. One of the things I'm curious about with Christian Braun is he the type of good player that Devin Booker looks at and says, oh, this guy does good at moving his feet and closing out. Yeah, but you know what? I'm just going to shoot over him every single time. I'm not afraid of this guy. That's a real question I have for him. So maybe he's a good defender, always in the right spot, but guys just don't fear him. That's a scenario I could see happening as well. My prediction now, what do I think? So that's the low end. Shoots poorly, doesn't have a great G League stint, doesn't get a ton of minutes and struggles when he does. And he kind of goes through this whole season of just being like, where does he? Should we be full G League on him? Should we be a little, fully playing him in minutes and he never gets a chance? That would be a bad thing. And then when he does play, looks like he's solved. My prediction, I think that he's not going to start the season in the rotation, but I think he's going to get a real chance at some point. And what I mean by real chance is not like, I think he'll get chances earlier that, hey, we're going to put him out there. We're just reaching for a lineup. We're going to put him out there and see how he does. Oh, 3 minutes, yanked, whatever. I think there's going to come a point where he gets like, hey, it's clear that over the next, 5 games or 2 weeks, whatever it is, Christian Braun is the backup shooting guard. Maybe that's because of injury. Maybe that's because somebody else is playing really poorly. Maybe it's a combination of both, but there's something where it's maybe Malone comes out and says it, or maybe it's clear behind the scenes and we kind of see it unfold where it's like Christian Braun is going to get 3, 4, 5 games of playing 15, 20 minutes a game, and we're just going to see how it goes. I think he gets that opportunity. I think he probably is a streaky shooter all year, not just in those opportunities, but go down to the G League where he's going to have games where he shoots 4 of 6, 4 of 7, and then he's going to have games where he shoots 1 of 6, 1 of 7. I think he'll probably finish somewhere around 35%. I'm not sold that he's a great shooter, but I'm also not sold that he's the shooter that we saw in Summer League that was shooting like 21% or something. I think he's probably a good shooter who will likely be streaky. And the hope is he's coordinated enough, he looks fluid enough that he can change his shot a little bit to become an improved shooter. In my mind, he's probably one of those guys that they just wrapped up yesterday. If I'm him, and you just got your deal, you just got your check, I'm probably finding out who my next trainer is. I'm working with the team. You obviously have your team people. You're going to be in Denver a lot. But I'm probably hiring somebody or bringing in somebody I know to say, hey, I need to get 1,000 shots up every day this offseason before training camp begins because I need to get my confidence in my shot elevated. I think he seems like a worker. I think that's what he has to do. And I think he'll be a guy that can be a reliable Austin Rivers-esque three-point shooter next year. Which is to say some nights you're going to have the Austin Rivers game. You're going to have the Christian Braun game. And then other nights you're going to be like, oh man, he just didn't come through. 0 for 4 in his minutes tonight. And those threes would have really helped. And then I think he'll be a fairly consistent rotation guy by the end of the year, but out of the rotation for the playoffs. So what does it mean fairly consistent? Because just through injuries, I think Denver will feel comfortable and confident putting him out there for 15, 20 minutes a night some nights, 10 minutes other nights. And then when everybody's healthy, like, okay, maybe he doesn't play, you play another guy. But more often than not, by the end of the year, he's just a guy you feel confident enough, a la Zeke Naji last year, where you're like, he's not necessarily a positive guy who's doing a bunch of stuff, but he's not killing us, and this development is important. I think he'll be there by the end of the year, but not elevated enough that Michael Malone goes, okay, what's our playoff rotation? Christian Braun's our 10th guy. Are we going to go 10 guys? I'd be like, no, we're not going to go 10 guys if that's who we got. So that's it for Christian Braun. Curious to see what other people think. If you kind of agree with that as sort of of the prediction and also as the parameters I'm sending for best case and worst case scenario. BetOnline.net, your number one choice for all your betting needs and sport info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MMA. That's basically what we have going on right now: baseball, MMA, boxing, golf. Head to the website or use your mobile device and keep up on all the trends and action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Back here, segment 2, Locked On Nuggets podcast. Which NFL stars move the betting lines the most? Starting July 18th, Locked On gives you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers at Bet Online. Available July 18th on Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube. Rolling live here, Matt Moore on vacation, undisclosed location, having the time of his life. I'm walking you guys through the off-season here and walking you through the rookies and what you kind of think, what you guys kind of see. Somebody asked the low post. I think I'm going on this week. We'll see. Last week was supposed to be on Friday, and then the DeAndre Ayton news came in, so ended up having to pivot. That's how it goes. I would say probably sometime in the next 2 weeks, but certainly before the offseason ends. I think, and just in talking to Zach over the last couple of days, I get the sense that he is very excited for the Nuggets. More so, like, I keep putting fillers out. When I was at Summer League, just kind of like, hey, what do you guys think? Nuggets, man, they're complete now. What do you think? I'm telling you, everybody's sleeping on them. Everybody is still kind of like, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. The Nuggets, they're all right. They're all right, but they're not in the teams we're most interested at. I don't agree with that. I'm actually pretty high on the Nuggets, and I kind of get the sense, that's why I'm excited to do this conversation with Zach. I kind of get the sense that he's actually like, why is nobody talking about the Nuggets? I think they're going to be really good. But let's get back into it here. We got Peyton Watson to go over. Very interesting Summer League. Not very impressive. I thought it was actually a pretty disappointing one. Disappointing. I think it was a little bit of a discouraging one from Denver's perspective. Meaning, I know I wanted to see it. Didn't have to see it consistently, but I wanted to see it from him. We got one game, 1 out of 5, where I walked away going like, oh my gosh, that was very impressive. It happened game 2. Maybe the perspectives would have been different if it would have happened game 5 or game 4, and you kind of felt like, oh, he was building towards it. The fact that it happened game 2 and then immediately games 3, 4, and 5 regresses back to that really, low threshold. I think he walked away averaging 8 points per game over 5 games, which is crazy because he had 19 in one game. So he really averaged like 5 points per game over the 4 games where he wasn't good, which is, I think, discouraging. I mean, you wanted to see a guy who was more of a scorer than what he showed. In these last 2 games, he just struggles to score. Like, even when he gets to the rim and makes a nice move or does this or that, the finishing is so iffy that you don't feel like, oh, that's how he's going to rack up stats. So I don't think this was a very encouraging one, but I also think it's important to look at Peyton and say he's a project. The defense didn't even necessarily pop for me at Summer League. He had some nice defensive moments. That part popped in that I could see it, but he was billed as a guy that could be he could be an NBA ready defender right now. I don't feel like that's true. If you said Denver is so good offensively that they just need a defensive guy, could you roll out Peyton Watson right now? I don't think you could for defensive purposes. You definitely couldn't for offensive purposes. It would make things very, very difficult. But I'm not sure you could for defensive purposes right now. It's too early to judge him and go all in. I'm just giving you my assessment after watching him on Summer League. He is a project, and I think a two-way project. So what does it mean for the high end for him? Well, number one, same with Christian Braun. Peyton Watson, I think, has to have that wake-up call. Oh, this is a lot harder. And I don't think that any of these guys took any of this for granted. So when I say this, I'm not saying this specifically about him. All rookies kind of have to have this realization of these guys, this league is good. And the players in this league are just insanely talented. And the best of them work really, really hard. Peyton Watson has 6 weeks before, the team starts coming in for pre-training camp type drills and stuff like that. To me, if I were him, I would be in the lab, and I would probably still be in Denver. I'd be getting, whoever you're going to move out here. These guys have a lot on their plate right now. I wouldn't worry about too much vacation time for it. I would be out here as quickly as I can, trying to improve the body, trying to work on some things to get some momentum going into the playoffs. So number one, high end for Peyton Watson this season, makes a strong impression at training camp and shows real growth. The player that arrives at training camp in mid-September, late September, you hope that it's one that, number one, he looks different. And everyone's like, oh my God, look at Peyton Watson. He really feel like you could tell he's been working these last 6-7 weeks. He's got like a good frame on him, but he's still really skinny. He doesn't have an NBA body yet. And to get through the rigors of the season, he can't afford. It reminds me of Jason Preston last year, my guy who went to the Clippers. Jason Preston got hurt in the preseason last year and ended up having to miss a majority of the season, almost like a redshirt. When I saw him at Summer League, he had the worst body I'd ever seen 2 years ago when he was drafted. You could tell that guy had made the most of not being able to play, but he can work out, and he had put a lot of weight on. Peyton Watson, to me, needs to show up in training camp with a noticeable improvement to his body. That's number one, where he walks in and we see pictures on media day and we're like, wow. If you remember, Jared Vanderbilt, I think, had this, where you saw him, and then when I don't know if it was his second year when he came back media day, it was like, holy hell, that's a guy that's been in the gym. Looks completely different. You need to see something similar there. And then at training camp, turns heads. Not as in, this is a guy that might be playing minutes. Just people are like, man, Peyton Watson, you could tell he's been in the lab. Good dude. And then well-liked by teammates, a great culture fit. This is another thing that we've been billed as, kind of getting the sell from the team. What is he? What kind of player is he? It's like, oh, incredibly good teammate. He gets it. He's going to be working on the right things. He's aiming at the right targets, all of those things. I think there's front office people saying that. There's coaches saying that. They're saying that from afar. We just drafted this guy. If you get teammates saying that, and it's funny because the example I'm going to give, you guys are going to say, well, that guy didn't work out. Big Tom Welsh. I remember talking to Nikola Jokic at training camp, and that was the guy. He was like, I love Tom. He's working hard. He's doing all the things you're supposed to be doing. He was very impressed with Tom, not the player. He was just impressed with Tom, the rookie. Like, he's approaching this the right way. I would love to hear the same thing for Peyton, where teammates are like, that's the guy. He's working harder than everyone. He's carrying the bags. He knows where he's at on the totem pole, and he accepts it. And he's going. I honestly think this is part of the high end for him, is that those things are meaningful for the position that he is in right now. He needs to excel at the G League. High end, he excels. He gets down there, he gains confidence and experience. So it's not one of those things where he's down there and you're looking at the numbers and you're going like, oh my God, another bad game. Like something where he's down there and he's shining and you can see the growth where you're like, in Summer League now, he kind of looked like, where do I fit in? Some of the games were low. You get to the G League and it's like, okay, he knows exactly this team is his in a certain sense. And he's starting to build that confidence to where he looks like, I didn't think watching Summer League, you could watch Peyton Watson and just say, oh, that's the guy that was a first round pick. Like if you didn't know better, you were just watching. Could you say like, oh, I'm going to pick out the first round pick? Carrying himself and being good enough to carry himself in the G League level where you're like, that's one of the prospects. That's the first round pick. These other guys are vying for two ways and this or that, but that's the first round pick. He'd have to be there. And then most importantly, he improves every month in the G League where you watch it when they start in November and then also December and January. And all of a sudden you're like, look at his scoring by month. It's going up. Look at his percentages by month. It's going up. And then lastly, on this high end, he plays consistent minutes for maybe a 2-week stretch. I don't think it's realistic to say high end, he's playing real consistent minutes. He has so far to go that even high end, he could surprise us, but I don't think that's going to happen. But instead, I do think there's an opportunity where maybe there's some injuries and some other things going on where maybe he gets called up and he gets 3 games in a row to play 10 minutes. It's like the Nuggets, they're not wanting to do this. The scouting report's going to get out on him before too long, but for 2-3 games, maybe it's a road trip or something and you're just short bodies. 2 or 3 games, you roll Peyton Watson out there and he plays and he gets an opportunity and does good. Like he doesn't hurt you. Maybe he's not going to shine, but it's good experience for him to get on the court and see the NBA level motivation and also just sort of a reward for all the work he'll be putting in behind the scenes. To me, that feels like the high end for Peyton Watson. If you go to the low end, though, here's what's interesting. The low end for him is really low. No growth before camp opens. No growth. If I were Peyton Watson, this would be the nightmare scenario. If I would be so scared of this scenario that I would refuse to allow it to happen. But if you show up to camp, body looks the same, all the same weaknesses, and you're doing drills, like think about, you go to Summer League camp and you got these dudes at the end of the bench. Like those are the guys you're going up against, whatever. If you're bad, you just blend into the sea of bad. If you go to training camp, and usually the Nuggets go away for training camp, they'll go to San Diego, they'll go to Omaha, or they'll go to Colorado Springs, but it's a getaway. If you go away and now all of a sudden the guys you're around are Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., like if you're bad in that setting, you stick out like a sore thumb. There's not scrubs like on the training camp, like working out. Those are good players. You're going to have a couple guys that are on that Exhibit 10 contract. So like Adonis Arms, I believe, is already signed to one. He'll be there. So you'll have, maybe Mitchell was too, I don't remember. But you'll have a couple guys who aren't NBA guys. But if Peyton Watson is there and he belongs in that crowd more than he belongs even in the Colin Gillespie crowd, I think that would be a really bad start to his NBA career. It would be a bad message to send of like, this is the guy we're going to be investing in. So I think he needs to show real growth. Low end is he doesn't really show any physically or skill-wise. And then struggles to show development in Grand Rapids. If you get to the Grand Rapids season, and I expect more so than in years past, I expect them to send him there full-time, if not full-time, for long stretches, not like spend the weekend in Grand Rapids, but hey, go down there for a couple weeks, work with our staff. We're going to build the system around you so that we can kind of get out. We can kind of see what we want to see from you from a developmental standpoint. If he goes there November, December, January, and you're just seeing the exact same output to where it's like, man, this dude is playing the most minutes, but he's not, he's kind of an anchor and the team's not winning because of it. I think that would be really frightening month after month. Shoots, here's the number for me when we get into hard statistics. Below 40% from the field in the G League. The field stuff is more important. Everybody focuses it on the three-pointer. I don't think he's a three-point shooter. Maybe he develops it. I know the Nuggets have plans to really hone. They have so many guys that they want to improve their three-point shooting. So I know they're going to be working on that, but forget it. To me, three-point shooting is a multi-year, you kind of build the foundation, you kind of build up. To me, I'm more worried for him about finishing from two and just finishing from the field in general. Get to the rim and finishing. If he's below 40%, those are Emmanuel Mudiay numbers. If you go look at Emmanuel Mudiay's career arc, he's 38, 39, like bad players in the NBA don't shoot below 40%. They just don't, especially like role player. You can't have guys that shoot that low of a percentage, especially when they're 6'8". So he's got to be above that 40% line. If he's below it, I'd be a little bit worried. And then the double, like sort of, he would be double screwed if he's shooting below 40% and also below 10 points per game in the G League. The G League, he scored 8.5 points per game in Summer League. G League is comparable to that, like talent-wise. It's about comparable to that. So is he an 8-9 point per game, 10 point per game guy at that level? If so, like Torrey Craig was like 35 point per game scorer in the G League. To be able to at least put up some numbers. I don't think his scoring is the most important to become a defender, and he needs to have a couple go-to ways of impacting the game on offense. That includes being a good passer. I think at the NBA level, he's probably not a big scorer, but he is a guy that could put the ball on the court. But at the G League level, he should still be able to finish like two layups per game. You get 3 free throws per game. You're already up to 8 points now. And then maybe you hit one mid-range jumper, 1 3 every now and then. Like that's all you need to get to 10 points. If he's not doing that, I think you start to really worry about what is this guy's upside. Shoot above 40%. He can't score 10 points per game in the G League. That would be worried. And then the season ends with very little momentum. For him, my perspective on him is I'm all in on this 2-year analysis. Like we're going to evaluate him this year. Hopefully he builds enough momentum that going into next season, you could now next year's G League team is built around him. Like he's the name of it. We're all excited because he's got this buzz going about, oh my God, have you seen his handle looks better, body is stronger, he's bullying guys. That's what you're hoping. There's that momentum. Low end, none of that momentum going into the next season. My prediction, I think he's going to be a good culture fit. I just have heard too many good things about him. I think that part is going to be taken care of. I think he's going to have an unimpressive training camp, but he'll have a good work ethic and attitude. So I don't think anybody's going to be dogging him, but I don't think we're going to be hearing buzz about, oh my God, he's been dominating defensively. He's everywhere. I think he's going to have unimpressive, but guys are going to be like, you know what? There's a foundation there. And his attitude and everything, culture fit wise, he's been great. And then I think he has an up and down season in the G League. I don't know that it's going to be a linear November, December, January. Everything's getting better and better. But I do think there's going to be pockets in there where you're like, oh my gosh, have you heard like he's on the streak of 3 straight games with 7 assists, or he's knocked down a 3 in 5 straight games. There's going to be these little things there, even if it is a little bit of a roller coaster along the way. I think he's going to shoot right around 40% from the field. This is the part I'm most worried about. I don't think it's going to be 45, 50%, which you would hope for a guy that's 6'8" and should only be around the basket. But I also don't think it's going to be 35, 38 like he's been in Summer League and like he was in the – I think he improves his body a lot. That, to me, would be the number one thing. I would expect to see some improvement from him by the time training camp opens up. But I would bet that by the end of next season, especially when he comes back – you go through a G League season, it ends in like March. you come back to the team, and then even though you can't play, or actually I guess he will be eligible, he'll just mostly be working out with Felipe from March, April, May, whatever. Those months, especially for a player that young, that's where your body can really change. And I expect by the end of the season, we're going to look at him and go, he's really put on. Like, he's got momentum going into the summer where you're like, he's improved his body. He's got a couple things that we're a little excited about. And you head into Summer League optimistic that he is going to look. This is how the Nuggets always build him, is that in 1 year's time, if he went back to college, in 1 year's time, he would be a top 15 pick. Instead of going 30 or maybe should have gone into the second round, people are going to be talking about him as, oh, this is a guy that should be at a lottery pick if he were to go back. If you look at the Summer League next year after the draft, if he goes back and has a Quentin Grimes-esque Summer League, we'll be back. Everybody will be back on board where you're like, okay, there he is. That guy just needed a year of seasoning, and now he's starting to break out. Maybe it's not in the same ways as a Quentin Grimes, but he's the best defender. He's making passes. He just looks confident and like you know what he is on the court. So that's my prediction, is that going into the offseason next year, you feel at least optimistic, not certain. I don't think we're going to feel certain about what he is, but I do think we're all going to feel optimistic that there is something there, some kind of foundation in place for him to kind of develop going into the final season there. Let me see if I got another ad break on this side. I do not, but I do have to take a break, though, for our digital ads break. And then on the other side, we're going to get to Ismael Kamagate. All right, back here, segment 3, final segment of the Locked On Nuggets podcast. And we're going to do Ismael Kamagate. I'm going to push Colin Gillespie and Jack White into tomorrow's show. But as we get to Kamagate, he is the guy. Some people I know were holding out hope that he was going to be the final two-way guy, that the Nuggets would make him, that would keep that spot for him and then bring him over, because then maybe they'll convert him to a real contract by the playoffs and he could be that. Doesn't seem to be in the cards. There's still scenarios where that could happen. I don't think they're realistic. I think you got to look at Kamagate the way you look at Colin Gillespie and the way you look at Jack White as, okay, these are guys that are going to have one more year of seasoning and that they're going to come back. I think Kamagate might have been the easiest one to project high end and low end in prediction for. High end dominates the French league. He's going back. He already won Defensive Player of the Year last year in that league. If he goes back and does that again, back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year. By the way, you've also got the big 7-footer, Victor W. He's going to be there. So you outperform him defensively and win that award, it would actually be pretty meaningful. It would turn some heads. It'd be like, okay, now you feel even more confident that this is a guy you can bring over the following season. So if he wins that again, or at least is in the running, you're like, man, it could have been him, whatever. And then he's just a dominant player in the French league where it's like, this guy's going well. Last year, he was scoring about 11 points per game. High end, 16, 17 points per game. Right now, I'm actually as interested in seeing if he is an offensive player of that caliber. Right now, you think about the type of things he did. Offensive rebounds, rolls, a little, not really dynamic stuff, but maybe he'd catch on the roll, one dribble and dunk, but it wasn't anything dynamic. To get to 16, 17 points per game, you have to have something a little dynamic to you. It doesn't have to be crazy, but you have to have some kind of spin move. You know, you got to have, you catch it on the short roll, you make a fake pass, and then you go up for it, or you take one dribble of sidestep around a guy trying to take a charge and lay it in. I don't think you can get to 16, 17, 18 points in the French league just dunking and rolling to the rim. You got to have something else. So high end, he adds not a lot. He's not going to be Hakeem Olajuwon, but he adds just enough that you feel like, all right. By the way, in this last game, he knocked down a mid-range jumper that looked pretty smooth. I was pretty encouraged by it. It was the only one I really had seen from him all summer league, but maybe that's it. Maybe he adds a little 15-footer elbow jumper, and he gets one or two of those a game where he feels, or baseline or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, he added something to his game. He's now a 16, 17 point per game scorer, which would be pretty impressive. Improves his rebounding right last year, about 6.5. Maybe he gets that up to 9 or 10 at the NBA level. I'm really curious, and I hope to have somebody on or to talk to some people maybe on a different show, but just talking about the development. What do they expect from him? What's the message to Kamagate of, hey, work on these things because we're bringing you back over next year if you can do these things? I would wonder how much rebounding is one of them. If it were me, because I know the Nuggets had talked about the idea of playing him with Jokic. Like, we think there's a scenario in which we can play a twin tower lineup if it worked out, if he develops right. Well, how do you do that? kill the offensive boards. Just become a super high motor guy that you're just always, this is the same plan that they have in Minnesota with Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns. They're going to have one guy that just is so hard to box out that it opens up the court. If he can become that guy to where his rebounding goes from 6.5 to 9, I think no question, you'd be like, okay, this is another feather in his cap. Bring him over. We'll get that. Develops physically. He's already pretty, elite physically, but there's always more you can do. He's 22 years old. He hasn't been doing this for long. See if he can become even more physically imposing. And then I think equally as important, learn how to use that. I thought there were guys in Summer League who were significantly disadvantaged physically against him that didn't feel disadvantaged going up against him. There's certain guys in the NBA where you're like, Jokic, here's the thing about Jokic's body weight. He's a big guy, a burly guy, but you feel 100% of his physical prowess when you're guarding him. And every player always says this. They're always like, he's so exhausting to guard. He's always leaning on you. He uses his body weight well. Like he knows how to turn it into advantage when you're trying to guard him. I think Kamagate needs to learn this role too. And a lot of this happens just on rebounds, on rolls to the rim. Become a guy where other guys are like, oh crap, I got Kamagate tonight. Like that dude, I'm going to end up with bruises. He's just going to be boxing out. If you're a big guy, you know this. One of the most annoying dudes to go up against in pickup is like super hustle big man. The guy who's not actually talented in any way, but just like tries for every single rebound because you get so worn down. Even if you're 10 times more skilled than that guy, you just get exhausted of it over time. I think Kamagate can become that guy where everybody looks over and they're like, oh, God, Kamagate, he's going to be going for every offensive rebound tonight. I'm going to have to box out. I'm going to be tired by the fourth quarter. And if I don't box him out, he's going to dunk it on me because he doesn't just lay it in or tip it in. He grabs it and dunks on you. So that, to me, that would be it. And then here's the crazy one for high end. And I don't think it's quite fair to compare him to Jokic, but I'm going to say it anyway. He makes a Jokic-like leap. Kamagate, I think he was the 44th pick. I can't remember off the top of my head. Jokic 41st. Jokic was younger. Kamagate is older, but Jokic had more question marks just physically. If you recall, Jokic was drafted, stashed. In the year that he was stashed, the Nuggets, there was a true flyer on him. Like he looked good, but he didn't look great. He looked good, looked like a prospect, he had some upside, but an NBA player, we don't know. When he went back for that stash year, and Tim Connelly would always talk about this, when he went back for that stash year, it was immediate. Game one, Jokic comes out and was just dominant, looked like closer to the version of him that we've gotten to know. And they were like, that's it. He made the leap that we were hoping, and this guy's going to be good. And of course, he went on to be the MVP of the Adriatic League. It comes over the following season. And I think Kamagate, I don't know if he can be the MVP of this league. I mean, there's some good players in it, including Victor W. But maybe he does make that kind of leap where he's working hard over the summer. You get into next season, and all of a sudden he really is the Dwight Howard of that league, where it's like he's so physically imposing and he's learned how to use it. And he's added a little bit of nothing fancy, but he's added a spin move. He's added a little jump hook. And now there's just nobody in the league that can guard him. And I just said upside with 16, 17 points a game. A player like that, maybe he's getting 20, 21 points per game. And in the conversation for MVP, the way Jokic became an MVP of the Adriatic League. That's the high end for Kamagate. Low end has the exact same season as last year. I actually think Kamagate's floor is higher than most second-round picks. This is why this is kind of funny. But if he goes back next year, and last year 11, 6.5, he goes back to the French League next year and averages 11 and 6.5. I think you're going to look at it and go, what are we getting? We're getting okay, we saw him in Summer League last year. He was all right. Can you go into next year convinced that he's your backup five? Absolutely not. Maybe some people are, some people aren't, but that's not, if you talk about the Nuggets title window is now, Calvin Booth needs to make surefire decisions of the top 10 guys, and then you could play around behind that. Do you want Kamagate to come in? The low end would be if you go into the offseason and you're looking at backup center, because remember, they only gave DeAndre Jordan that one-year deal. You're probably going to have to make a decision on Jeff Green, maybe also on Zeke Naji this offseason. If you go into next season uncertain of whether or not Kamagate can be the backup center, you might as well say he's not the backup center, because you don't want to go into a title or bust year with a guy that's unproven, who you're also like, we don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. You end that in that scenario, even if you brought him over next year, you would probably still sign a center that's going to be ahead of him in the depth chart. And the onus would be on him to outperform that guy, which could happen, but I don't think you want that. And so if he returns as an identical player, goes through the season, is the exact same guy, and then going into the offseason, the Nuggets have to be like, I don't know, same exact production, that'd be bad. My prediction, I think he gets a little bit more to his game. I'm going to say 13 maybe 14 points per game. So up from 11, a little bit more. Most of that comes not from dynamic offense, but just from a little bit more confidence, knowing how to use it. Up to 13 points, 8 rebounds. So up from 6.5 to 8. Noticeable improvement, but not quite a leap. And then I think you show growth, but the Nuggets still add a center next offseason. And I think it becomes one of the toughest choices that the Nuggets have to make next year is Kamagate looks like a guy that if you look at him through one angle, he's the guy that you can pencil in 15 minutes per game as a backup center. But if you look at it from another angle, you go, yeah, but if he's not, you could tank the whole season, and now we have to build our roster with these contingencies around there. If you look at the roster, there's not a lot of room for contingencies. You don't want to have 3 centers on your roster because you're uncertain of numbers 2 and 3. You want to be able to go in. He's got to use this year to show the Nuggets, I'm your guy, I'm ready. I think it's going to be right on that line, and that's what scares me. For him to get to that next level, he's going to have to really, really impress. That does it for today, guys. I'm excited to see what you guys had to say. I'll scroll through these comments. I see a lot of people in the chat right now kind of sharing their takes on them. That's where I think for those 3 guys. Tomorrow I'll get to the two-way guys and talk about what I expect from them. In a weird way, I almost feel like the floor is higher for the two-way guys than it is for any of the other ones. So there's an opportunity, I think, a real opportunity that Colin plays meaningful minutes with the real Nuggets next year, and that Jack White gets a chance to play real minutes there as well, just through injuries, this or that. And they might be more ready now to handle those minutes. So we'll do that tomorrow. And then, like I said, Matt Moore gone all week. So I'll be flying solo. Thanks so much, everybody. Hit the like button on the way out. Don't forget to leave a rating and